This is your one and only 𝐈𝐸𝐻81 with your daily dose of video goodness, and welcome back to another informational Valheim video. Today we're going to take a look at melee versus magic. Let's get to it. So let's talk about what I did here. I figured one of the easiest ways to test these two would be to put them against each other doing dungeon runs. Then I could time the dungeon runs and average those times together to see which one allows me to clear dungeons faster. Now I realize speed isn't always the metric we should use when comparing two things, so while I was running these dungeons and swapping back and forth between melee and magic, I also took notes on pros and cons and tried my best to ensure that they were based on fact and not opinion. So there were also a lot of variables to work out here, and I did my best to eliminate all of them. So the first thing I did was I selected 4 dungeons. Now I know that is a relatively small sample size, however this takes a ton of time to do, and I felt like 4 would give us a general idea of how well each of these classes do when it comes to dungeon clear speed. This would also ensure that neither of them got any type of advantage. Now the second problem was dungeon memorization. If I run the dungeon with one class and then run that same dungeon with another class, that second class is going to get an advantage because I'm going to remember parts of the dungeon. I won't remember the whole thing because my memory is terrible and I get lost in these things all the time, even after running them once, but it was still important to balance this out. So to fix that problem, I alternated which class I started with for each dungeon. This means I started 2 dungeons with the mage and I started 2 dungeons with melee, giving us some balance. Also note that in order to pull this off, I set everything up in the world I was going to use, marked off the dungeons, had teleporters, all of that. I also set up the character, and then I backed up the world and the character so that each time I completed a dungeon, I exited out of the game and restored that backup. So while each class did the same dungeon with the same layout, the level of the units is chosen when you first enter the dungeon. So this created some variables that were out of my control. However, due to the random nature of it, I feel like it all kind of works out in the end. Note that the character's skills were set to level 35 with the exception of blood magic and elemental magic. In my non-admin normal playthrough, these were taking a little bit of time to level, and blood magic drastically slowed down its leveling speed at level 20. However, since the recording of this video, I have found a way to level elemental magic relatively quickly. But since the video has already been recorded, we're going to roll with the numbers that we have here. So everything 35 with the exception of blood magic and elemental magic, those were locked at 20. For each class, I chose what I thought would be the best options all around for that specific class. So for melee, I went full heavy tank. This gives us a ton of survivability. I chose Frostner because it works really well against the Seekers, and I chose the new pole arm because it also works really well against the Seekers, allowing you an active stun and giving you the ability to dispatch Seekers very quickly. For the mage, I just use the fire staff, the frost staff, and the protection staff, as well as the 𝐈𝐸𝐻 armor, giving us increased mana regen. So you've been watching these runs the entire time you've been watching this video, and you're going to continue to watch them until the end, but I want to talk about the times and the averages. So in order to monitor the times, I just used the timer on the rested buff. I started the times when I started the first attack or when I first got attacked, when I was timing how long it took me to clear the outside, and I started the times for inside the dungeon at the time I entered the dungeon and at the time I exited the dungeon. So for our mage, our average time to clear the outside was 41 seconds. The average time to clear the dungeon was 11 minutes and 6 seconds. For melee, the average time to clear the outside of the dungeon was 59 seconds. The average time to clear the dungeon itself was 13 minutes and 5 seconds. And you you can see the full breakdowns of each of those times on the screen now. So the mage was able to clear these dungeons a good bit faster on the outside and inside than melee. Now, I do want to point out that I may not have had the optimal melee setup. I chose to use the safest melee setup for these runs, but safest doesn't necessarily mean the fastest or the best. And considering the fact that our average difference for outside clear times was about 20 seconds, and the average difference for the inside clear time was about 2 minutes, I think it's relatively safe to say that it may seem like there was a big difference here, but they're probably pretty much the same in the grand scheme of things. But, and this is a big one, that doesn't necessarily mean they are equal. Magic has the potential to do way more damage than melee. So for these screenshots that you are about to take a look at and for the numbers that we are about to talk about, I set elemental magic to level 35 so it matches the same skill level as our melee weapons. If you take a look at our damage capabilities here, you can see that on the top end, if we were maxed out at level 100, if we use the Staff of Embers, we would deal 120 blunt damage and 126 fire damage, totaling 246 damage. Now, if we take a look at the pole arm, you can see its max damage is 85 pierce and 46 lightning, totaling 131 damage. Frostner's max damage is 35 blunt, 58 frost, and 20 spirit, totaling 113 damage. Now, here's the interesting part. At level 35 in elemental magic, the Staff of Embers does 55 to 91 blunt damage and 58 to 96 fire damage. If we just take the low end of those damage numbers, so 55 and 58, that totals 113 damage, which is the same amount of damage the Frostner can do if we were a full 100 in clubs. If we take a look at the low end of the pole arm and we add those numbers up, so 39 and 21, and we add those together, our low end damage is 60, meaning that no matter which one of these melee weapons we use, if they are the same level that we are with elemental magic, our elemental magic is going to hit a heck of a lot harder. Let's talk about some pros and cons. Let's start off with the pros and cons for magic. First off, with magic, you are fast. You are not hindered by much. The 𝐈𝐸𝐻 set has a total speed reduction of -4, and each staff has a -5 movement speed penalty. This is noticeable if you are running along someone who did not have any negative move speed. However, when you are playing this class, you really don't feel the move speed reduction. You feel fast and you feel nimble. And speed is a huge advantage in this game, allowing you to do things like dodge attacks without rolling, get behind a target, and run when you need to run. Another pro is the protection bubble. The protection bubble and the protection staff is absolutely insane. That's all I can say about it. It's insane. It's like having a secondary health bar that you can just recast every 2 minutes or recast anytime that it gets taken away. And it protects you from all sources of damage. It also prevents you from being staggered. It also allows ticks to attach to it and suck the damage from it instead of from your health pool. The other thing is the fire staff does large AoE damage, meaning that groups are the best option for you and they're easy to deal with and fast to kill. You can parry a decent amount of damage with the staves, which is just another pro to magic. The cold staff is really good for crowd control when you're in a group because it has a shotgun-like effect. It's easy to spray and pray and slow everything down, giving you a second to get away. If things are wet, it does increase damage and slows them for longer. None of your magic attacks use stamina, meaning all of your stamina goes to movement. Because all of your attacks are ranged, you can fight on any terrain easily. If things are above you, you can hit them. If they're below you, you can hit them. Now let's talk about some cons because it's not all sunshine and rainbows with magic. You have to constantly think about and be aware of your bubble and keep it up. You are a glass cannon and can be one-shot easily. The bubble is the only thing stopping that from happening. Melee only needs to pay attention to stamina. Mages need to pay attention to stamina and and their mana, or iter, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to refer to it as mana because it's mana. While stamina is not a huge issue because you don't use it in your attacks, running out can still mean death for you. The same as running out of mana at an inconvenient time can also mean death. You have to eat mana foods. Those foods don't have the stats for health and stamina that other foods have. They do have the stats, they're just not nearly as high. So you sacrifice health and stamina to gain mana. This isn't a huge deal for HP because you have the bubble, but it is a big deal for stamina, so it's definitely a con. You have much lower armor and HP, meaning that if you do not have the bubble up and you get hit by pretty much anything, you're probably going to die. This creates a very glass cannon-ish playstyle, and I say glass cannon-ish because you're pretty tanky with the bubble up. However, if it's not up, you're a total glass cannon. That's a big con, because dying in this game has serious consequences. That's it for the pros and cons for Magic. Let me know if you think I missed anything in either of those categories down there in the comments section. Moving on to melee pros. There isn't many of them. First off, you're tanky. You're extremely hard to kill and can take a massive beating because you have very high armor and very high HP. This also means that you are hard to stagger. Your shield blocks almost all attacks, and for me, I was using the tower shield, so depending on what shield you use, that's going to vary, but in this setup, it's a pro because I was using the tower shield and it can block almost anything. I found it to be much safer and easier to stun enemies, allowing me to kill them quickly. However, this works best in a 1v1 situation. And that's pretty much it for the pros for melee. I couldn't think of a lot here, and that could be because I'm a bit biased. I find Magic much easier to play. If there's anything that I left out here that you can think of, please let me know down in the comments section. Moving on to the cons, there's also not many of those either. The first one being you're super slow, even more so when you have the tower shield out. Like, you're just insanely slow. It's like you constantly have the chill effect on you. This may be okay for some people. This may not be a con for some people. For me, it's a con, and I think that gameplay wise, it should be considered a con even if you are okay with it, because speed in this game gives you massive advantages just because of the way the game is. Let me know how you feel about this down there in the comments. Next, stamina is a massive issue with this because you are using stamina to attack and to move, and you always want to try to sprint so you can gain that extra little bit of speed, and I just found myself constantly running out of stamina to the point that it was just getting annoying. This next one is a really big one. You need to be fighting on level ground. They really need to change pole arms to make them a bit more cone-based, because if you are attacking anything or trying to attack anything with the pole arms and there is a slight variation in height, you just miss every single attack. It's not quite as bad when using Frostner because Frostner attacks in different patterns. It attacks left and right and up and down, allowing you to hit some things when it is above and below you, but yeah, it's brutal attacking anything on any type of ground that isn't flat when you're playing melee. And for the last one, while blocking is great and you can block almost anything, it does build up stagger and you can still be staggered if you take a lot of hits back to back. Your health is very high, so it is difficult to stagger you, but it's still a possibility, especially if you have something like a 2-star or 1-star seeker hitting you with attacks that hit extremely hard, while other seekers are attacking you as well. And that's it for the cons. There's 4 of them and 3 pros. There wasn't a lot of pros and cons to melee. It's more or less meh. In the end, I feel like Magic is so strong. Just from playing through the dungeons with both of these classes and getting a feel for them and practicing with them both for a while, by the time I was at the 4th dungeon, they felt like an absolute breeze using Magic. I didn't ever feel super concerned, and it just felt easy. Way easier than it felt using the melee setup that I was using. This may be worth revisiting with a different melee style setup later on, but I'm not sure what I would use because the melee style setup I use in my normal play is also a bit glass cannon-y, and I'm just not 100% sure that that is representative of how most people are going to play melee in this game, especially from when I've streamed this game and everybody asked me why I'm not in heavy armor. So yeah, in the end, I'm gonna say Magic takes this one, and that's my opinion from the testing that I've done here. Let me know what you all think about this down there in the comments section. If you would like to see other comparison videos, I'm eager to hear your all's thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, you found it helpful and informational, consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell so you can be notified when I upload other videos. And if you want to see another awesome guide, you can find one of those on the screen right now. I want to give an absolute massive shout out and thank you to all of my channel supporters for helping to keep these videos sponsor free. You all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to become an official channel supporter, check out the links in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and share your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.